What's up? What's up? What's up? Good morning, everyone. How is everybody doing today? Welcome, Dale. Good to see you.
Hey man, how's it going?
Yeah, good. Welcome, everybody, to the Flipside Streamcast Live. As always, I am Flip. That is Dale. Glad to see you on this Thursday, the fifth Thursday. A little bit earlier today, we had a little bit of a real world change around, but as always, we're good for change. We're good for pivot. We're resilient, right? All those types of things. We're able to move on today and still get
Every
to you
time
live.
I hear that word pivot, it reminds me of
Uh-oh.
was that Friends episode where they're trying to get the couch up the stairs, like
This
pivot,
is a long
pivot.
time.
We had to pivot today, but it's all
That's right.
good. Then I had to butcher like StreamYard fixing it, and LinkedIn's yelling at me, going, "You can't do this." And then, but here we are. We made it, brother.
Here
We
we
made
are.
it.
We
Let's
did.
get
We
her.
did. And listen, we're here to wrap up today, as you guys know, Man in the Arena. So the Tom Brady documentary that's on ESPN Plus and everywhere else where you want to stream it. But we're excited. We're excited to see it. We only got through. We were supposed to get through 1 through 5. The first one we couldn't because there were so many leadership lessons that we saw. So we want to finish up today with 5 through 10 and really talk about it. And to be honest, it really hit. And I think overall, my impression of the second 10 really, obviously, he and to summarize, the first four really were kind of him in the single life. He really hadn't had
Mm.
a family side of his life yet. And an overall initial takeaway for me that I really saw, and before we get into it, was this was a very different person now that his son was born with his Bridget Moynihan, and that became someone in his life that was being super influential. And then he met Giselle, and honestly, I got to be honest with you, I wrote a bunch of Giselle quotes from each one, and I was like, some things I had never heard of before, and I was like, that's awesome. And whether she said them or not, she said them to me on my notes, and I was like, there's one to me that we're gonna get into it when we hit the episode, but there's two little words that changed everything, and I think it's an amazing piece. It's probably something I'll start to keep into my book. But let's dive into episode 5, if you will, and that was no guarantees. And we're sitting here in the 2007-2008 season. Yeah, what are you thinking? What was this? This was a big year for him. He had the injury. They were talking about the ACL MCL injury this year they had gone through.
Well, they
Um,
had the lockout too.
they did. They did have that lockout.
And I guess from a leadership perspective, just one of the things that was a good takeaway for leaders out there in this part was the initiative and the leadership role that he took during the lockout, right? Like, and they talk about this. They're like, hey, everyone else they're on vacation. They're sitting home and they're like, this is somebody else's problem. We're locked out and they couldn't practice and whatever. And Tom organized the team privately, personally, and practice
Yes.
and put in the work. And I
Yeah.
just felt that in comparison to what others may have been doing or did or whatever, I thought that just again command a lot of initiative there to do the right thing, right? Like that's what leadership's about, right? That's where courage is here with us with Lions Guide is like doing the right thing even when everybody's looking. There's a lockout going on. Everyone's focused on that. The players are like, man, we can't do anything about that. That's between the ownership and the player association, whatever. But we got to see the season's going to happen, right? So we can sit around and watch ESPN about the lockout, or we can get to work. And they got to work, which was top of my list on this episode. I thought was awesome.
Yeah, I thought that hearing from again, every once in a while, if you didn't hear the first one, we'll throw little tidbits of sports in because it's a cool little sports thing. But I thought it was great that their tactic was, look, everybody's going to be slow. Let's change the pace of our game and work on that. I
Yeah.
thought just from a tactics perspective, from a football, I was like, man, taking advantage of that thing and thinking it was going to be that way, I thought was really good. Some other things though I took, um, you know, we talk about leadership being lonely, right? Or you've heard that before, where leadership can be lonely, and it could be. It's sometimes to me that's it's almost never lonely sometimes because somebody's already there saying, "How can I help you?" or "What can I do?" or
It's
"What can I."
different. It's different.
It's a
Yeah.
different loneliness. What I thought was great was though, and this is, I don't care. Again, we don't have no agendas here on Lions Guide, but you end up. He had a partner, and this was Giselle at this time, but if I looked at, because really he was becoming now not just a player and, a son, he was now becoming a player, a father, a husband, and a friend is what he was looking at. And that's how he was talking about it. And I think that's really important. I've had leaders and I've been in situations myself that, look, life happens, right? And we sometimes place athletes on a pedestal in this, they don't live like we do. And the truth was, and I realized this throughout 1 through 10, he was absolutely normal in a lot of his, and still is, but he was absolutely normal in the problems he was facing and the things he was kind of facing. And we all have dealt with, military wise, me deploying for 10 months was almost no different than him playing for 10 months and not getting to see his son like he would all the time, right? So, but I think, and again, it gets thrown a lot. It has been thrown a lot. Laura and I are actually going to take this on next week, but resiliency, he kept coming back and saying, what do we have to do for this thing because of the injuries, because of the lockout? And he really was like, here's the grind, right? And they talk about the grind a lot through 5 through 10. And I thought it was really important. That was good. And Giselle said something, and Dale and I were talking offline. Giselle said things throughout these entire 5 episodes that I was like, man, I need to write that down. It's really good. So I'm getting these.
I got a lot of respect for her, kind of.
Absolutely.
And again, getting to know. I mean, again, this is just called a reality. We got to take a step back from the media presentations of folks out there, right? Because
Yep.
I didn't know. And again, this is this apart, right? Like it goes back to a root question we ask here at Lions Guide is like, how do you know that's true? Because we watch some personality and go, oh, she's a B, or she thinks she's all that. And always it's like, how do you know that's true? Have you ever met her? Have you interacted with her? So I like just seeing some down to earth piece of, like, even as a mom, I don't know if it was this episode or not, but one of my notes to agree with you here was like, I just wrote the importance of the support system outside of the office, because this was the first episode she came in and she really spoke like, hey, I'm going to take care of everything so you can focus out there, right? She didn't come in and go, I'm a supermodel, you're the quarterback. What are we going to flip straws on who's supporting whose career here? Like, no, she came in and was like, no, I'll take care. What she talked about, take care of the birds and whatever.
Right,
stuff.
the parents and the hamsters.
Yeah, I really honored like her humility from her like stature, let's say, to how she was in partnership with his goals and where she was and how she could then support him and be a caregiver, type of role in the relationship so he could stay focused. And the importance of doing that, I mean, you and I both know in this day and age, the importance of leadership at home. And we talk enough about, right. We're talking about lifelong leadership here and where leadership comes home. So when we talk about in the office, the importance of engagement and knowing your people and treating them like they're human and spending time with them and all those things, right? Here you've got 2 superstars, let's say, super successful people who could be outwardly focused, but instead, multiple times throughout the series, there's a dial down showing the importance of being the mother and father to all their children and being that, not outsourcing it and, all that. I'm sure they had support systems as well, but
100%.
So anyways.
No, it was great. She said in this one, she said, challenges are opportunities in disguise. I thought that was great. I thought that was a great little saying that she had gotten. That was one of the first ones that I said that. I wrote the same thing, right? Having a stable spouse, partner. I even put mentor, right? Because it could be anybody. You don't have to be married to just having someone to be able to go to lean on for those introspective things and to ground you, right? Because I think that's another key. Paul says all the time, don't let your ego tie with your rank. And when your rank falls, your ego is going to fall with it. Again, seeing it from a Buffalo Bills perspective and getting pounded for 20 years, it was refreshing to know that there's a normalcy to it all. And again, you lose focus on that because, like you said, they're up in the clouds and everything else. One of the key things I thought here was great. Bill O'Brien came in as the new offensive coordinator, and he gave ownership to Tom. Now, I look at that 2 ways. One, the dude's already won Super Bowls. what are you going to come in and do? Right. He's already, but that was a piece he didn't have before. Tom didn't have ownership of the offense and what to do. And Bill gave him that. Now, you would look at it and go, okay, you're a quarterback, I'm a coach. So technically, I'm kind of like over you in a sense, right? But what I liked is their working relationship, and it was gruff. It was gritty at times. I loved it. But he gave him ownership. And that was something we talk about all the time about giving ownership to your people. He kind of did that and said, hey, Tom, do this. Now, again, he had already performed at the highest level, but still, like, that was his growth. His growth was, you got an employee, he's working hard, and this happens with doers all the time. You get a doer, anything you say is it's done early, it's done amazing. Client products are awesome. How do you grow that person? And I thought Bill O'Brien coming in and saying, I'm going to give you ownership now, because you're at that level of mentality of the game. I thought that was a great leadership point from their perspective of saying, let's give Tom some ownership. Let's let him make some decisions of it. That was a big takeaway for me was that piece of the puzzle.
And there's different perspectives too, right? And again, you want to grow your people. You want to be from a leadership perspective, like, you want to be growing your people and empowering them, right? Is the word I'm looking for. And that's what we see here. And that's done in partnership, right? I'm never going to stop talking about looking for the win-win. And isn't that it, right? Like, the opposite of this is you could have him as a coach focused on how he looks as a coach, right?
Right.
But that's not the team objective. The team objective is to win the Super Bowl. Right? I didn't even say win game, right? Win Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So the best way to deliver that is to work for the win-win in partnership. He needs Tom to be successful. Tom needs him to be successful. And this is the case in any business, right? The manager needs the employee to be successful. The owner needs the managers to be successful, and vice versa, and that's man, once you guys start rowing in the same direction with that type of mindset, not that win-lose crap, we're all rowing in the same direction. And I love that about this episode. And yeah, do difficult conversations need to be had? And is there ultimate responsibility for outcomes, like of Tom's performance on the field and Bill's performance on the sideline? They're paid for set responsibilities.
Correct.
But honoring that together, mutually and respectively, right? That's what I'm talking about. That's the win-win.
Yeah, and he said to wrap episode 5 up, and before we move to 6, I think one of the things he said is it's keep it in perspective, right? They never once, and they talked about it a couple times, right? They were like, okay, we did that last year. All right, we can do it again. But then it was like, oh okay, culture shock, and we'll talk more about the 4-game thing when we talk about it. But like, he talked about it, and it was this year, I think he really busted this out. He talked about a friend relationship, teammate relationship, nurturing all those relationships that he had.
Yep.
And that was a whole team theory to him. And I think when we talk about what in a business, right? Do you have to look at nurturing, the family stuff of your employees as well as the business side? And there's a big balance in all of that. He found that. He was finding different avenues, I think, to be able to offset so how he was. We'll get into episode 10 where he talked about a regret, which I actually really liked. But I think this was the year for him that really the rest of his life came together. Those other pieces. He had already had his family the whole time. The family was his sisters and his mom and dad were there. But just the rest of it started to come in, and I think looking at Gisele, it wasn't just, of course, the superstar quarterback gets the supermodel. I thought it was a lot more than I learned. It was a lot more than that during this episode, which I thought was good. And then that led us into episode 6, where we fast forwarded 3 years to 2014 and the bleeding. And this was, again, so very specific to football here, but not specific to anyone else. They go and draft a high performer, Jimmy Garoppolo, very early. And there's the media is all over this. Like, is this what it is? They have this gap of 3 years where they're not hitting on all cylinders and winning getting to the Super. Garoppolo comes in, and I love what Tom says, right? And this could be for anybody where a high performer comes in, instead of thinking to himself, shit. And I'm sure he did. I'm sure he's like, I still got to compete. And he used it as a challenge. But he embraced him and greeted him as a teammate. And I thought that was, I knew they were including him on decisions, and they told him, wasn't a shotgun, but wasn't a Aaron Rodgers, Favre, and Love scenario. But I just thought, like, it was easy. I was going to embrace him and greet him as a teammate. And I thought he found the good in it, right? He found the good in saying, this dude could push me, right? Yeah. He can make me better because, right? And whatever. And he didn't talk once about teaching him or mentoring him or anything, which was fine. We don't need to get into that. But I thought it was great that he just said that. And I think that's a great leadership lesson of saying, look, whether you're a mid-level manager, whether you're bringing someone in, you don't need to look at everybody as a threat necessarily, and say, how can we all benefit from this? Can that person push me? And then, as right, there's a give and take. I thought that was really good.
Yep.
As well, this one, I think, that's right. So I think, I'm going to make sure I get it. Is this when it happened? Yeah. So he also this year started to take care of himself more. So he thought about, okay, this isn't just about me slinging a ball around and being young. He was getting hit a lot. So he was talking about that. But one of the big things is, and he became a captain that year. And I thought it was really interesting when someone had to tell him, hey, man, you got to talk now that you're the captain. Mm. And that to me was communication, right? We talk about leaders, and I think there's a fallacy of you have to, if you are a leader, you have to talk. I don't believe that that's always true. I think you could be a silent leader that sets the example. I think he was doing that already. But I think when he became and put the C on, then all of a sudden there was a responsibility now, not just to lead by actions, but you had to also be what I would consider in football anyways as a locker room leader, right? You had to be able to talk and take on those. How do we take those things on? And I thought that was really important with communication and leadership, right? It's not, because we always say you lead by example, you lead by your actions. But I think there is a point in time where you have to be like, you can't just be quiet, right? You have to do more.
I think that personally in coaching youth sports, just kind of bring this to culture. I've told other coaches in the way I kind of work, and this is youth. So there's a third pillar here that might not be applicable here, but there's a substitute, I'm sure. Coaching youth sports, talking about culture, I say, hey, the culture of a team is dependent on 3 elements, and that's the coaching staff, right? How they interact in the culture of them, the captains, and the parents. And at a youth sport level, I say, hey, the positive outcome of a team as it relates to culture, right? All 3 of those have to be jiving, right? Like you can't have the coaches arguing about what's right, what's wrong, who's on first, blah, blah, blah. You also can't have that as captains, right? The captains have to be humming and singing the culture tune. And then in the case of youth sports, the parents do too, right? Because if the kid gets in the car and the whole ride home, all dad does from the sideline goes, well, that coach doesn't know what he's doing, and he should have put you in. I tell parents this as part of my preseason, that when they come back to the field next practice, they're going to repeat everything that you told them, right? So don't be a part of the problem. So I think maybe when it comes to that third element here in professional sports or whatever, but let's take it to the organization, right? Like the leadership needs to be humming, and they're part of it. And your managers, and who would be the third part in a business, right? I mean, that takes place with the parents, I guess.
It's some of your customers and what they're telling you, and you believe
true.
What
there
you
go.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to have a healthy culture, it's not just the leadership, it's not just the managers, it's not just
Correct.
the staff. There's a trifecta there that needs to be maintained. And so to your point, to bring this home, like that's the importance of him being a captain now and speaking up, like, because now he's a part of the culture. So if he's just mute with the C on his chest, right, that's going to affect the culture, You
Yeah,
know?
and he was leading by actions, period. Like
Yep.
there's no doubt. I mean, he already won multiple Super Bowls already with the team. You're coming in and dude, you're like, oh my God, you're Tom Brady, right? I get it. I understand how that mystique. And now all of a sudden, I think Will Fork was in this one, and he basically said to him, hey man, you now have it on you, right? And he looked back to the Teddy Bruschies and the Harrisons and the Ninkovich and the Vrabels, and he was like, man, those guys, I remember what they were in the locker room. And he mentioned part of that real quick. And we need to, by the way, we promise all of our Streamcast listeners, we're going to do a youth sports one. So I've been a coach for soccer for 15 years. I do the triad. So I talk about parents, players, and coaches and what that triad means for communication. I would tell parents all the time. I said, listen, very simply, and I'll save it for an actual talk that we have, but I used to tell them consistently, I see them for, if we were 3 hours a week, right, for practices, but some people drove an hour to come see us. And I said, so you get 2 to every my 1. And if you are not, right, and I would communicate with the parents saying, this is what we're doing. This is how the game went. And I would tell them, just like you, straight in the beginning, number 1, we're all vibing on the same chain, right? We're all talking the same language. I'm going to tell you what I'm telling them, because if I don't, and you either don't know, they're going to look to you still, because at that young age, kids are still fighting between pleasing mom and dad and pleasing the coach, and not realizing that they're playing for neither of those two people.
Mm-hmm.
They're playing for the teammate next to them. Obviously, that was resonating with Tom. He was talking about you play for the person, right? Bill was talking about, Belichick was talking about just do your job. Don't worry about anybody else. Multiple times you would hear on off cuff, just as they got Mike from the sidelines, you would hear, guys, I don't need you to do more than you're supposed to. I think Josh Daniels did this one time. Don't do more than what we've taught you to do. Just do what you need to. I think it was the Super Bowl where they came back, which we'll get to, but it was just do those things. And I think that I can't help this. It boils down to basics, right? Like just do your basics and be brilliant at what your basics are and be able to do that. And that led to the ending final of that year, the Seahawks, right? Seahawks had won the year before. They're on a roll in 14, right? And all of a sudden, again, Deflategate happened already, by the way, this year. So another point of adversity that right now Tom's got to be a media icon because they have problems, right? And he's got to face that part of it. He's a captain now, right? All the stuff that comes with it. And now all of a sudden they get to the Seahawks, right? And they're down. Adversity comes through. Man, and Will Fork said it wasn't my decision not to run Marshawn Lynch, but whatever, dude, right? So, which by the way, a great book, Annie Dukes, which is a poker player, has Thinking in Bets, and one of the first things she takes on is that decision, and she looks at that from a perspective of percentages. It's a really great book.
What's it called?
Thinking in Bets, BETS, and she takes on that monumental decision for them to go for that, and she looked back at the numbers and she's like, it would have worked. Like it was absolutely, it was an easy decision to say that. And they actually had audio from on the Man in the Arena. They had audio of the Seahawks head coach saying, oh yeah, just run one of these ones. And it was that play. And it wasn't that he thought about it. He was like, they got 8 up. Let's just do that. I just thought it was great. But Annie breaks that down. It's a great thing about how we take chances, we take risks on stuff, about when we make decisions. But yeah, it was a great culmination to episode 6 of just showing that, they had gotten through a lot of adversity, still got there, obviously, with what they thought was, look, focus on the team, focus what we do, right? And you got to have that communication and step up when you need to through what could have been what was a lot of adversity for them that year.
Well, I think one of the themes I picked up on there too was, Will Fork talked about, commanding respect.
Yeah.
Right. And I thought that was huge, and just how, respect is earned. I think this is probably a bit to Powell's part about, your rank and all that stuff. Like, it's not the rank that commands respect, there's some tradition around responsibilities and treatment of subordinates to that rank, let's say, but respect is always earned, right? And
Correct.
you can be a, E6 of poor character, poor leadership, whatever, and not have any respect of your subordinates, right?
We used to tell people all the time, I had to salute you. I didn't have to, and I had to
Oh yeah, I like
respect
that.
the rules applied to that.
Right.
But there's no way that I had to, remember, I'm just showing you I don't have a weapon in my hand. That's where that came from a long time ago. I don't have a weapon in my hand. That's all I'm telling you. Right. But that does not mean in any way, shape, or form I have to respect what you did. And there's been plenty of officers that I was like, yes, sir. Roger that, right?
And as a team, the other thing too that I loved about this episode was some of the emphasis on always on the next objective. And I heard this throughout the whole second half is just focus, man. And I caught myself writing it again later on in episode 8. Just they were focused as they were focused on the next week. They weren't really looking back. Now they were always of a growth mindset, like what didn't work, why that didn't work, and things like that. But that's intentional looking back. It's not complaining. It's not those things. But they were always focused on the next objective. And then one of the quotes, Tom dropped in this, if we're ready to move on to the next one, was that there's no easy climb. There's no one dropping you off at the top. No one's carrying your shit to the top for you. That's a quote, so don't ding me on that one. No one's carrying your shit to the top for you. No, you said it earlier.
I did not.
You've got to do that yourself. So he's basically, no one's taking you to the top of the mountain. You've got to do it yourself. And again, that you just have to remember that as a leader, the hard stuff, you're going to own it, man. And I've had conversations recently about what was referred to as being the bad guy as a leader. What sucks is I've always got to be the bad guy. I'm like, time out. Probably the fact that such difficult challenges are referred to as the bad guy probably isn't helping your desire for your team to step up and take these things on their own, right? Because, and there's always the opportunity to talk about perspective and mindset of, I said, to rephrase this, like, you don't have to be the bad guy. You get to lead through this challenge. The mindset there is completely 180, right? I have to be the bad guy, or I get to lead the team through this challenge. Which do you want to do? Right? And so I just like, leadership is tough, but you just got to step up and do the hard things. They're not the hard things, the challenges, to what I love you quote said earlier, like challenges are opportunities, man. And as a leader, challenges are that still, it's not you being a bad guy. It's not you being a hatchet man, whatever. Do you have the opportunity to lead?
Right.
Take it.
Yeah. And it's perspective and transparency. When I would tell everybody that's like, first, it's a perspective of you. It's not a bad guy. You're being a leader, period. Mm-hmm. So let's just make sure, let's make sure that that's the most important thing. You're a leader, and that is part of the deal of being a leader, is accepting it. Brady had to get in front of the camera and talk about Deflategate. And afterwards, whether they won or lost, he had to talk about that. That is part of leadership. There were other people in different positions. The long snapper never got onto a podium and said, we lost because, right? You never see that happen, right? Unless the long snapper did something that was crazy, right? But that's just part of the deal, and it's part of leadership, is that you have to, if you don't want it, sorry, that's just what you do. Now, the Patriots, let's just put this out there. The Patriots handle their media. You could tell that's not what I want to talk about. I'm just here to talk about the game. Bill's got his own way. The Patriots away. It was breathed and influenced throughout the entire thing of how that happened. But as we moved on to episode 7 and Surrender, this is in 2015. He starts off with, and I thought this was great. I had never heard it before. The 4 agreements. And that was, don't take things personally. Don't make assumptions. Try your best and be impeccable with your word. I was like, I don't know where that came from.
Have you read that, the 4 agreements?
I have not.
Oh
So
yeah, pick it up. It's on the
yep,
Lion
it
Sky Library, man.
needs to. Yep.
Good read. Yep.
Yep. And so I love that he had done it. And I don't know why I probably hadn't seen that yet, but it's simple, right? They were simple things that were just like, man, this is it, which was really good. He talked about inspiring through action. I thought that he used the word inspire at that point. Again, he's a captain. This is now his second year of captaincy. And that he says, and I'm now inspiring people through my actions, not just setting the example. You've now transcended, and to me, that's very important, right? When you become a leader, look, every leader in the very beginning, you're sort of okay. I'm supposed to now, right? This is what I'm supposed to do, and then all of a sudden you get it, you understand it, and now you have to you can't plateau. Like you can't, that's plateauing. Once you learn that, we used to say this all the time with our chiefs mess in the Navy, right? The first year was a learning year. And you now have the anchors on, you now are learning all this, but really, and you may be forced to make decisions that you never had, right? The first year, airman recruit that came on board walks in and sees you and you just got pinned yesterday. He doesn't know that. She doesn't know that. They just know that's the person I'm supposed to go to. So what we used to say is the people who really were completing their leadership training were the people who made it last year, right? So now these newbies, you took a full year and this was, now you get it, right? Now you understand it and now you can grow from that. I thought first time he had said it in now we're in episode 7, second year of captaincy. He said, I'm inspiring through my actions now. And I was like, man, that to me, you get it, right? That was a key indicator of saying this wasn't just by leading by example. Now I'm inspiring through my actions. And I think if you're a high level leader and you want to get to the point where you're not just setting the example, to me, that's easy. Now you're inspiring people to set the example and to be leaders, right? That's the next step.
Say that again. You just said something, and you said not setting that you're inspiring through action.
You're inspiring through it because it's transcending from setting the example. It's the next phase of being able to do it. Setting the example is easy, right? If you're a Christian, there's 10 commandments. There's my first one. If you're a Christian, there's 10 commandments to tell you what to do and what not to do. Perfect, right? I got it. If that's the way you roll, whatever. Everybody has their own rules that they live by. Set the example, right? But I'm now taking the next step and I'm going to inspire people through what I do. And that I think that's where you've really become an inspirational leader and a leader that is focused on getting the best out of everybody. You still have to maintain yourself, right? And for him, he was still maintaining this. He now had, right, the critics, you could hear, by the way, Max Kellerman, if anybody doesn't know, Max Kellerman is still on ESPN. He came off horrible and all this, of all the stuff that he unloaded on him.
You see that dude? He's also a boxing commentator.
Yes, he's the boxing commentator. Yeah. And I was like, wow, dude, like Max was hammering him, and they just kept bringing it up, and I was like, interesting how they played this one out. Another one I thought he said, and so I'm going to quote Dale Walls. He turned me on to one 2 weeks ago that I thought was great, which was, if you're confused, you're going to say no, right? If you're that one.
Confused.
He said one.
No.
Yep, and he said one that I say all the time. We used to say it all the time. If you're explaining, you're losing. And Deflategate finally came to a head. He went into the thing and he said, I could say whatever I wanted, and politics aside, whatever. He was like, it's hard to go up against 32 billionaires or whatever, but or 31 billionaires. But I thought it was just that he said, if you're explaining, you're losing, and I think that's so true, right? And that's kind of extreme ownership, right? When you talk about it and go, all right, I screwed up, or whether you believe me or not, okay, got it. I take the heat. Let's move on. And I think him saying, if you're explaining, you're losing was.
Well, and it gets really into episode 8. I got a couple points from Surrender before we move to that, but
sure.
A look ahead. It's how to deal with the noise and the haters and the right. And there's no upside, right?
No.
And often, and the best way I can quote kind of this example sometimes. It's a Jay-Z song that one of the lines is, wise man told me don't argue with fools because people at a distance can't tell who's who, right?
That's great.
And when you take to the streets on topics and you're just there's no value in the debate, the explanation, the justifications, whatever, like just stop right there. Like there is no value in the debate, the discussion, the justifications, excuses, or whatever.
Yeah.
This was another great episode about the support network of because this 7 was when the family came in, right? The sisters and
Yes.
all
7's when
that.
the family came in. Yep. Yep.
So again, that was, I think, a great nod to leadership and the importance of home, and how that bears weight on your ability to lead well, right? To know that you've got that backstop. They talked about how the parents, I believe it were never like they weren't going to put pressure on their kid. They were always just going to show that they were there to love them, win, lose, draw, whatever.
I got a couple good ones that they said that I was like, ooh, I actually
Yeah.
went and told Katie, and I was like, this is awesome. His dad said, right, they were there for everything. And listen, I want to make a point out too. Not everybody has the same upbringing. Not everybody has the same parents. There's 1,000 different scenarios that could happen of why you're at the position that you're at. Whether you're a leader, whether you're a small business owner, whatever it is. It's not just to me, it wasn't his situation was about having a family support system that could do things that he couldn't because he was doing his thing, right?
With Giselle, you mean?
And his sisters, because in this episode too, his mom starts fighting cancer,
Yep.
and he's like, I can't get there, because of all my commitments. And his sisters were like, we got you, do your thing, right? We've got mom. This is kind of where the team, and as you look at it, well, okay, we rise to the occasion. You've got to do your thing. We do our thing, but we'll support that side of it, right?
Yeah.
His dad said something that I thought was awesome. And this was a total parent thing for me. And I thought it was great. It's life's gonna beat my kids down. He's like, but parents shouldn't. And I don't he did not mean it in the sense of physical, because I don't condone that at all. But I just was like, man, that's awesome. That was I told Katie right away, and it's dawned on my head, like, sometimes you get your kids come home and they're like, this is my safe, happy place, and this is where I can relax and leave the dishes because of whatever. And you see them when they go out in town and they're completely, and people are like, man, your kids are amazing. And I'm like, well, come into my house. It's not how my kids act in the house, right?
Yeah.
When they leave garbage out. But that he said that, I thought was just amazing. Like, and I was like, man,
this came up in conversation with Raj Kara yesterday, Lions Guide episode that'll come out next week. One of the things that he was most proud of, having started many businesses and led as a business owner throughout his whole career, is really his whole life post college. One of the things he was most proud of was the relationship with his son. Like, he always was there, and he was talking about how neat it was that now as adults they have like very, I was just talking about the bond of of where he played that part, like with his kids and being there and being supportive and building a relationship, never letting the business kind of take away from that, and always putting the family first. And now as a result of that, like him and his son, it was the example he was using, like the bond they has grown together over those years, right? And I think like what Tom Brady's father was saying here, like that's at the grassroots of that, right? Like, being that support system, being the safe space, knowing that you're the rock that, they're kids and they're, the world's giving them all it's got,
Yeah. And he focused on Jack a lot actually through the next episodes, which I thought was good. He took him to Michigan. He took him to the Green Bay game.
While he was suspended.
And I think what was interesting, on a side note, if people didn't know, that was not from Giselle. That was from I think it's Bridget Moynihan. I could be wrong. But that was from, so he was really trying to make sure that Jack lived I think he lived in California is where I think he lived, but
I believe
he
so.
was making sure, and again, he has the means to send Jack on a private plane whenever he wants to, right? I mean, I get it, but he made the efforts to do it. He knew that it was an important thing, right? And you could take that from a perspective of a father, of a mother, or you could take it from a perspective of a leader and saying, look, some points in time, some people are going to need, good employees, and your high performers. Sometimes they're going to need a little bit of the way I looked at it, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they're going to need a little TLC, and the team should be able to support, right? Like we get this happened in the Navy a lot. When you're in the military, probably you saw it too, or any service really. When you're young, you think the rules should apply the same to every single person. And when I sat in the leadership moments, I knew it was good not to apply everything the same to everybody, because every situation was different. And the best thing for them, and as well as the Navy and how we were thinking, was not to apply something as a blanket coverage. It was to do it on a case by case basis, as much as it looked, and then be transparent with it. And I think being able to do that, I've gone through stuff too where HR policies differed from people because it was a different scenario. And it wasn't
Mhm.
because someone was higher or better, because those are easy, right? You're like, hey, our C-suite people get this, or and a brand new employees get. I get that all, but if you're a true leader and you look at someone and you care about your employees in the same way he was doing for Jack, of saying, look, I know I can't be, and in episode 10 he ties this all up by saying something about his kids that I thought was absolutely not only shocking. It wasn't shocking to hear it, but it was interesting that he had said it. But I just think I related that to leadership and said, you can make sure that people are taken care of, and you don't have to do it. Make sure that everybody needs and gets what they within your means to be able to do. And I thought he was doing that for Jack in a great way, because he couldn't be an everyday father there, and he didn't have, right. It was a little bit different, and I almost thought he went out of the way that the episode, well, all of them was like, this is my, like, Jack. I don't even know the other kids' names, honestly. Maybe a couple, but he very much highlighted that one. And I thought it was just, again, it is what it is, but I thought it was pretty good. A couple other things. So, hugest thing I learned, Giselle gave me a whopper here, and it is for everybody, the optimist and pessimist world, that it's the word for, FOR, and the word TO. And it changes an entire perspective when you change that word. And she said this, and I thought it was great. Again, mom having cancer, Deflategate was just coming on board, a bunch of stuff. And she said, and I think he may have said this about her, but he said, Giselle looks at things and she says, why is this happening for me versus why is this happening to me?
Mm.
And I thought that, to me, that will be on my wall of a list of things that I will say from now on. I thought that was incredible. Changing one word and being able to say, why is this happening for me, instead of saying, why is it happening to me? Man, you have a completely different outlook when you say that, right?
Yeah.
It's not a woe is me, we're losing. It's how do we build on this and do something with that,
Yeah.
right? How do we now go, and is this going to make me stronger later, right? Looking down the road and saying, what lesson can I take from this? One of my big things, I don't necessarily believe in failure. I think if the true part of failure is, if however long it takes, if you didn't learn from whatever mistake that was, then it becomes a failure. And I say that, and I will argue that to the most upteenth degree, even to in war, when you lose a teammate on a mission, what did you go back and do to put in place that'll never happen again? Because that's there, right? So, but just being able to use the word for and to, I think that is one of the most powerful things I took from the entire series.
Yeah, I love that. And again, it's back, and right. What do we talk? We're talking about mindset again, right? Like, just talking about mindset, and it's just leading the way, because that's a leadership mindset. Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening for me? Like, when you adopt that mindset of the world's happening to you instead of you're happening to it, you're that bobber in the ocean I talk about, right? Like when why is the world happening to me? Like you're the bobber in the ocean, right? Why is this world happening for me? You all automatically got a rudder now. Like you're moving. Like
And honestly, it was I highlighted it. I was like I got all done with. I said, Katie, a supermodel from Brazil gave me more insight. Like I was like, I'm learning more. Like not learning, but like just putting things into those perspectives. Not that I knew. I'm a huge optimist, anyways, and I look down the road. But I just thought that was it was amazing. Another one before we move on to episode 8. I thought about his sister said something, and this was personally about him that I thought was great. And I think it's a leadership trait, right? It's a trait that you have to have. He said he's 1,000% committed to being better than the day before. And I thought that was, I mean, just simplicity of, and you think to yourself, well, how many Super Bowls can you win? Like, and he even said it one time. He's like, okay, now I've done it 3 times. Cool. Like at that point,
yeah, he did say that.
Yeah, I remember seeing one time saying, if you broke his career down into 3 segments, each one of them would be a Hall of Fame career with numbers and with everything and Super Bowl wins and MVPs and everything else. And you're just like, and like it's unfathomable when you look at what it is and how long he's been doing. And we'll get into 8. That'll lead us night into 8. But to hear his sisters say 1,000% committed to being better than the day before, man, take that on board for yourself. You want to talk about a high performance thing that you promote? There it is. That's it right there.
Man.
Just
a buddy of mine says it like this: if you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah, true. Yep.
Period. Take it to the bank.
100%. Yep.
Take it to the bank. Go look at the stats of what happens when people retire. What happens to people that keep going after they retire versus the people who choose to do nothing with their lives and their life longevity. Go look
yeah.
Go Google
it. That's actually, yeah, that's a.
Google it.
Yeah, that's very. There.
Always be growing, my friends.
That's correct. If you ain't growing, yep, I would agree with you. That moves us into 8. Nobody's business. 2017. This is where the Guerrero and his whole life, like I'm gonna now be, this Chinese fusion of medicine came in with Guerrero, and he starts kind of doing something. Let's put this into perspective. He's 40 years old at the time. Okay, 40 years old. Leadership wise, I'll get to that one in a second because I think there's something there's a great message that's never talked about leadership and what it's needed to. But let me just go for a fact of saying TB12 and Guerrero and everything. I think what he ended up doing was I know it. He really was like, how do I continue to do this at the same level and say to myself, I may have to do it differently, right? And I think leaders I'm going to use mine as an example. And for the viewers who don't know, I retired in 19. Dale retired, and I'll use air quotes for all of us.
Retire.
Well, whatever we did, right? We started over at a certain age and moved into something else. And I think what was interesting to me was, he opened his mind to be able to do something different, and it was obviously successful. Like anyone who says to me, like, "Oh, you're TB12," dude. I mean, I'm a believer. Like I am a believer. Like, how do you argue?
You didn't buy that before you started watching this.
No. Did you? Yes, I did. No, I absolutely did. I had this before. I knew. Yeah. I knew. Well, I just listen. There was one thing I learned on here that actually proved that I was right. I knew that stretching because for those of you who don't know, Alex Guerrero uses ancient Chinese Far East medicine techniques and puts it in. A lot of massage therapy, a lot of muscle stuff, right? Things that weren't. They use the word pliability, and I think that is 100% there. I mean, how many times you talk about, well, your IT band's too much, or I mean, just in sports wise, right? I thought it was amazing though that that as a leader, he could have said, "I've been doing it this way forever. I'm good." He didn't, right? The leadership lesson to me was he looked at himself and said, I need to make a change. How do I do this?
Yeah.
Oh, look, I could do this. And most leaders will not. You get self-deceived, and self-deception is real. There's a great book on it. To be able to go, okay, we've been doing it this way. Why would we change? And seeing other people and going,
Because
oh,
things
blah, blah,
have
blah.
changed, right? Like
Right. Yep.
that's the point, right? Like you
Yep.
can put those blinders on to the externals all you want, but they're still happening. And I love what you're saying here. It's a really great point where he didn't. The used to be's don't make no honey, man. I
Right.
used to do
Yeah.
this because I
That's right.
used to be that. But you're not playing that game anymore. You're 40 now.
Yep.
So to achieve the results that you got in your 30s and your 40s, what do you have to do now? And as a business owner, you got to say the same thing. Like, you know, what worked when you were just you and your spouse running the business might not work when you got 12 people working for you, right?
Right.
The
Yep.
market's changed, the times changed, the clients changed, the client needs have changed. You've got to change. Like, and this goes, I think, where you're bringing this home, hand in hand with you've got to be constantly growing. You've got to be constantly evaluating inside out. Like, so there you go, man. Yeah. No.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, to me, that was a huge. I was like, wow, like that one was good. Here's a big leadership thing that I saw in this whole thing, and it finally clicked with me. For those of you who didn't know, they had people, media, and even I think at the facility were having issues that Alex Guerrero was his methods were very different. I think what I realized in this at this point was that one of the reasons why Brady worked well is he always had an opposite that was with him to almost ground him, right? So he learned from Belichick. He obviously got his work ethic and his how he was going to do things from Belichick. That was obvious to me. But what I found at this point was I don't care if it was Belichick, if it was Gronk, or if it was Edelman. He had someone that was like not, and I'll use the case of Gronk and Edelman because it came out here. I thought about a yin yang. Like, Brady's stoic. He knows how he has to be, right? That's Gronk's crazy, right? And Edelman was just as crazy in another sense to keep him grounded. Like, the one thing is Edelman's yelling at him and he's like, "You're old. You're old."
I like that too, man. I was like,
perfect.
those are the guys you want, like siding with your potential and push knowing you and pushing
right.
Your
So
buttons.
Leadership, we talk about diversity, we talk about varying viewpoints to push yourself and to challenge yourself. I thought those were, and he nailed it in season 10, in episode 10, when he said, I had the right people in my lives at the right time to be able to do. Whether they saw that, right? Because it would be great to be like, Belichick's like, I know how Brady is, and I know he needs someone that's this way. Probably didn't happen that way, but it'd have been perfect. You just look at those people, and it was I'm a huge Teo yin yang. You got to find your opposite, to balance yourself out. I thought that was a great balance. Like I saw that in this one the most, was that is a great balance for you to be able to kind of see, and it came out in this whole thing. Not only and look, this isn't the one where his finger. I don't think this is it.
This is
the finger
one.
8.
Yeah.
The finger's 8, right. If you ever wanted to know how pliability works, that his thumb went back to here and it ripped his skin open and didn't do anything to tendons or anything else, that should tell you right now that that stuff works. Like,
dude.
And to me, I looked at Katie, I'm like, who are you going to argue with? Look at their banners. This dude could be right. I mean, this dude could have done anything you wanted at this point. Like, why make the argument? Why? That was one thing I didn't understand in leadership. Man,
this is something, dude. Do we have a hard stop in 5 minutes for you?
I do not. No, we can keep
going. This is an area, right, that, and the only way I can surmise it for a leader, for the litmus test to these things is just reflecting and reviewing. Is it what's working, what's not working? Because I feel like, and I'm not even going to judge the situation, I'm not there, but these times, and this freaking consumer economy that we're in, where everyone's buying credentials and then they go justify their credentials. I lived this through folks that like, I got my MBA at Wharton, or I went to Notre Dame, or whatever. And that's all cute. You demonstrated that you could go to a great school and get a great degree. That's all you demonstrated. And you should be coming future oriented to what are you going to do with that?
Right.
But the fact that that's what you've got doesn't mean right? Just because it's not, it doesn't stop there.
Right.
And so in this part about the Western medicine thing, I feel it's because I'm seeing this, my work with 22-0, Dan Jarvis talks about this, that what we're doing in healing PTS and the effect of it, the pushback that it gets from actual therapists, because it's not what they do. And we're not doing therapy. We're helping folks that are suffering still through a method that's demonstratedly work, data included. But I just got this conversation the other day that someone's talked about to their therapist how great they're feeling since doing the session. And the response was, well, they're not a healthcare professional.
Who cares?
Who cares?
Right.
Talk about the results and then seek, right? We talked about this before. Choose curiosity over judgment. That's ego judging right there, because, well, wait a minute. I went and did all this schoolwork and did all this and paid all this money to get this degree. Yeah. Yes. Necessary to do that. Important to do that. But man, don't dismiss. And I think this was here that, you got people calling him snake oil and all this crap. You know what I mean? And it's like, when do the results begin to justify the means? It's just, and honestly, the top of this, my notes for this episode, which is called Nobody's Business, by the way.
Yep.
Was just all about haters and ego, man. Like haters and ego. How to deal with them. Haters versus the unconventional choice. It's his choice to make. And that's where it was like, at one point in this episode, Brady's like, mind your own freaking business. Right.
Right.
Like, and I guess, again, this is where, they talk about through the whole series, like, ignore the noise, man. We've talked about this too, I think, in other topics and lessons, like, do you for your objectives, period. Don't let the tail wag the dog with people judging you and it's always been this way. I mean, that's the power of being a leader. That's the freedom of being a leader. And if you can find the mental strength to push those people out, and they're both sides. There's people that are hating you from below. There's people that are hating you from above. You got to ignore the noise and just do the right things on what's working, what's not working, and just be objective. Like, you can be wrong. You can be wrong. But just because they're telling you you're wrong doesn't make it so, right?
And by the way, let's be very specific to this man. The dude has put up, I think at this point, 5 banners in your stadium. I joked with Katie, right? Like, I was like, if he was working, whatever he was doing, who cares? Like, nobody should care that he's doing whatever he's doing. Like, the doctors and everybody else should be like, okay, go ahead, whatever. You're passing your physicals, you're performing on the field. And honestly, at his age, I got to be honest, from a football perspective, he was doing everything you were asking. And it was his mind that was probably doing more things than his body was. His body could meet the minimum of what it needed to do, which was fine, and whatever. And again, when they showed that it went when his thumb went all the way back to my ding, and all it did was rip his skin open, and nothing else happened, I was like, and then to see him sling the ball and what he did, I was like, why is anybody arguing this point with them? Like, just everybody should shut up and just be like, dude, whether I believe it or not, dude, whatever you did worked, right? Whatever it was. Snake oil. Put as much snake oil as you want on it.
Right.
It
Seek
worked,
curiosity instead of judgment, man. Like, And that's just like, it's just a part of this. It's a part of this world today that I just don't agree with. And it's a part of our sloth of mind problem that everyone just wants to go with whatever they're told instead of thinking objectively. And that's where we start throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's like,
Right.
today's modern, and I kind of ballpark all this stuff into technology. But we see it. We see the results of it today, like with our obesity epidemic and so on, where we just believe what we're told, but we don't challenge the incentive of what we're being told by who we're being told to. Humans have been around for hundreds of thousands of years. We're not just figuring this crap out now, but over the last 100 years, we've been sold on so much technology in our food and our whatever. So everything's been commercialized that I've come to learn we've thrown a lot of the baby out with the bathwater. So when it comes to the things that Guerrero was doing and ancient Chinese, and everyone goes, oh, well, that's woo woo, whatever crap. Look, man, like because of exponential growth of technology, we've been able to accelerate some results through pharmaceuticals and all that. But don't dismiss that there's hundreds of thousands of years of learnings in humanity before that.
Right.
And
You can't. I mean, people have lived that long. I mean, you can't not and to see it and everything. And look, America has no place.
well, what was it? It was something that somebody said. Like they were calling for surgery, and in 3 days, Guerrero had them fixed.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it can't. You just look at the performance. Look at what he did the following week with the thing on it, with just a piece of tape on his hand. He didn't even have a. I don't think he even played with the glove. At least they didn't show that he did. And again, you're just like, how is anyone arguing this? And who cares?
Who cares? It's nobody's business. That's what he's.
I was just like, you got to be kidding me! Like, who cares that he's that he's doing it? So that kind of led, the Chinese thing led into the episode 9, which was, he started off by talking about the Chinese farmer lesson. And, for those of you who don't know, I'll recap it. The Chinese farmer has a son and he loses his horse one day, and I'm going to just recap it fast. And a couple of days later, the horse comes back with 10 friends. Now he's got 10 horses. And the guy's like, hold on. It may be okay. It may be cool.
Well, everyone's praising it, right? Like
everybody's praising it.
At first, they're like, "Oh no, you lost your horse," and he's like, "Well, maybe." Yeah. And then the horse comes back with 10 horses, and they were like, "Oh my goodness, that's great! You got 10 horses." He's like, "Maybe,
right?" And then one of those horses bucks his son off, and they're like, "Oh my God, those horses!" And he's again, it's maybe, right? But then what is it? A little bit later, like there's a war, and his son can't go because he's and it's like broken. Maybe. Right. So it's a great lesson. And Tom used it in great retrospect. And he was just like, look, you just never know what these opportunities are going to end up being, which I thought was great. And for him, I think this is when he gets slammed with the Deflategate thing for the first 4 weeks, and he takes 4 weeks off. And, it was, I think for him, I wrote it. He said it was the best 4 weeks of my career.
Yeah.
And you got to think, that's a bold statement to say these are the best 4 weeks of my career. Of all the Super Bowls you win, you could have made, at this point, you could have made a week of Super Bowl wins for him to say, add those days together and it's 1 week. And he said he got to go down to Costa Rica. He got to hang with Jack. He got to go to Pebble Beach with his family. And it was just the best. And I think this talks about leadership, right? This is the somewhat ugly side of leadership, and small business owners have this. People think, well, I'm not going to be an employee. I'm going to be a business owner, and they think they're getting personal freedom, and they think they're getting power and control. And what you're ending up getting is you're getting way more work than if you were just an employee and could clock in and clock out. It's a lot more work, right? And you have a lot less personal freedom technically when you do that, right? And this is the whole rich dad, poor dad part, But I thought to me, the way I took it, not to get business wise, I took this as, if you're a leader, you need to make sure that those other parts of your life are solidified and you don't forget about them, right? Yep. Because you have to think about whether you have a family or don't, right? That side of the picture. You have to talk about your spiritual well-being. You have to think about your mental well-being. Like, that was this for him. It was a release. He still worked out. He still kept in shape, right? I thought it was great that he's down in Costa Rica doing, and they have a big bag of bands. He said that he went with them, and
Yeah.
and him and Giselle are working out. Great. But he said it was the most romantic week of his life with his what? Like, you can't. You have
Again,
to remember
if
those
you're not
pieces,
growing, you're dying, right? And that's why
right?
even
Yeah,
training for this 100 miler right now, and one of my unofficial advisor group said, "Hey, don't get fooled into these recovery days. Like, you still need to be doing something, right? You might not be
right.
running, but you still need to be doing something."
Sure. Active
And
stretch, whatever it is. Active.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, don't
Absolutely.
waste time. And time's your greatest asset. Don't
Yeah.
don't waste it. And he didn't. Like, even like with this 4 weeks off, he took those opportunities to tend to he couldn't tend to football, so he tended to the other important things
Yep.
in his life. He could have sat home and complained about the whole situation. He didn't sulk at all. He's like, "Cool, I'm gonna go do a coin flip
Yeah.
in
I
Michigan.
thought,
I'm gonna
and
go visit my son. I'm gonna go to
I,
Costa Rica."
I think it was the next one. Gronk did the same thing. He said, "I took the best time." And listen,
Oh, when he got suspended for a game. Yeah,
right, he did. Yeah, when he hit Tre'Davious White, by the
yeah.
way, he did say he was sorry, but doesn't messed up stuff that he did. But um, I when you look at it, there are definitely times you need to take a complete 1000% mental break from stuff and not think about it. Right? You
Mhm.
just mentioned this 100 miler still doing something. I don't disagree. There are also times to just do nothing. I had an incident last weekend. I took my daughter. She was at a whole week of a very intense goalkeeper camp, and we went to which was it was a dawning moment for us. We went straight into an Olympic development ID or a regional event. She was only playing half a game. She was trying to apply what she learned in this camp right then and there. And it wasn't, I think she believed it was just going to go. I just learned it last week, right? Well, she's playing it with 12 goalkeepers and they're all playing together. And now all of a sudden she's on a real game. And right. And so the truth is as a father and as a coach of soccer, I saw it. I saw she was applying these things. I also noticed that she was physically exhausted. And so she couldn't apply those things to do. And this kind of went with it. And we were supposed to play on a Sunday as well. And Saturday, I called the coach after talking to her because she came down and she just broke down. And I was like, you know what, coach, she's exhausted. She's mentally exhausted from what she learned. And what it was going to do, it was going to hurt her mentally if she couldn't process and do those things on the game field. And we had a great talk on the drive home. We were in Cincinnati, and I said, buddy, it's going to take you some time to implement things. So this goes with all of our leadership stuff that we teach and that you learn. It may be instantly applicable, but a lot of things take time to get good at once you start learning to do that. Whether that's you learning to take a break for yourself in this case, right? Tom had never taken a break from the game. That as weird as that sounds, you have to learn sometimes to do that. Sometimes your high performance is so high, you're so there, and then all of a sudden you go, wait, I feel like I'm going to lose everything if I don't.
It's
Right.
a
And
it's a neuro pathway
yeah,
thing.
absolutely.
And because have you ever gone on vacation and then you come back and you just got all this energy and you get all this stuff done that's been sitting around for the last 6 months,
Yeah,
things that
absolutely.
are piled up. And that's just because you've disrupted your habitual neuro pathways. And now you've come back with a fresh set of eyes, so to speak, and you can execute. So it is really important. And to your point, one of the ways I like to look at let's say new skills, and this is important for leaders, like as you learn things or you teach your people things or maybe you're changing operational things, when you train it, then you practice it, and then you experience it, right? That's the flow, right? You can't just train it and expect them to be experts. You can't just learn it and expect to be an expert, right? You train, you get the knowledge, you get the practice, you go practice, and then you get the experience, and that's a growth path. So to your point, like your daughter goes and she learns new skills, but she hasn't practiced it,
Right.
and she runs straight on the field with it, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Not in a game anyway, she hadn't. And so you
Right.
could see that it was going to be detrimental. And I think that's really important, not only for a parent, but for any leader. If
Yep.
Powell talks about, and again, it's hard not to go back to what he says. And he's like, give the right leadership lesson to the right person at the right time, right? So
Yep.
some leadership things are not going to be able to do that. In this case, this was being able to do something. I thought it was great. So there's a perfect thing in number 9 that was said, and I don't know if it was a Belichick thing or if it was a Brady thing, but he said, practice and execution becomes game reality, right? I thought when you just got done saying it too, like practice and execution becomes game reality. I thought that was, when you look at that and say, okay, we're going to implement something new, let's be patient. But as we practice it and we execute it and it becomes that, then it becomes work reality or it becomes business reality, right?
Yep.
Like I think that is a perfect representation.
What's the saying? You hear a lot of military guys say this. I've not burned it in yet. Like when things get tough, you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to your training or whatever.
Oh, well, you fall back on you. Yes. Well, so it's falling back on your training, right? So
Right. You don't rise to the occasion, you fall
no,
back on your
you
training.
fall back on your training.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and that's why you do things over and over and over and over, because then it becomes muscle memory for you to be able to do it, right? It's going
Yeah.
to see this. You see this, then it's almost robotic, right?
Yeah.
And they all talked about it, even during the whole things. Like I think Vince Wilfork talked about it when he said, like there was something he saw that he knew, and he said Bill Belichick made us learn all their things and learn everything that we could about them. And he was very detailed orientated in all of that. And he said, I saw it and it was muscle. I knew that it was going to be that way.
Right.
And I look at that. One of the last things I took from this, and I think it was great. I think his dad was in this one. I can't remember whether it was his dad, but whoever said it, he said, Brady has an amazing compartmentalizing tool inside of him that he uses. And I think that is absolutely important for leaders to be able to do, is to be able to not, the easiest one is to say, don't mix, don't put emotion in your business decisions. We've heard that before 1,000 times, right? It's not going to be good unless you step back and you look at them. I think compartmentalization is a absolute needed, practiced type of thing to be able to do for business leaders in any way, shape, or form, right? We talked about it a little bit before. You can't take every situation that's the same. You can't look at every employee as they're the same. You can't look at every leader that you have and it's the same. Everybody's unique. Compartmentalizing. Oh my God. Compartmentalizing those things together. I think, you got to separate your issues that you have, take them at face value. My boss loves to use data points for stuff and make his, use those things for those. To some degree, that's, I think, absolutely spot on. Get your reasons why you want to make a decision, put it in a box, make that decision, right? Understand that it may have other influences and other reactions from it, right? But just understand that that's what it was. So I think that was a great tool that he was able to kind of throw from it. One football note for me that was great. I think I learned this throughout the whole thing, but you don't know what you have as a fan, anyways. I'm never going to judge my team until after week 4 from now on. I thought it was great. If you can win that many Super Bowls and you can, they were 2-2 at one point. They were, 4-0 at one point. They were 3-1 at one point. And they were still, we didn't even know what we had until that week. I'll never judge a team anymore until week 4 from now on. That's just me from a personal side.
Well, from a leadership perspective, right? Let's dial that into like how you evaluate change, or a new hire, or again, change or whatever, right? Like you can't make a change, make a hire, be a weekend, go, oh, this isn't working. Like it's because they talk about this, like, again, it's because I'm glad you brought this up. This was acknowledging the emphasis on reflecting and reviewing, right? Like, hey, this is our plan. Okay, go execute. All right, what's working, what's not working. It's always this constant reflect and review. It's why it's a part of the Lions Guide to the self-discipline, right? Like you've got to, like, it's not just try and quit. It's try and learn, try and get better. So
yeah, I just made the mistake, and it's tough when you teach it. It's one thing, but you gotta, even if we teach this stuff, we still have to do it, right? Like you and I personally for Lions Guide and for everything else, we still have to apply everything that we're talking about, whether we get along and we know how to do some of the things are become very natural. But for our listeners, like, we're still going through stuff and saying, all right, what's going to work, what's not going to work, how can we do this, how can we not do that. I just made the mistake at the old at my company that I work with, and it was like, I didn't, I didn't think about that there was going to take time to do, and I didn't go back and review after a certain time, because you think, oh, it's working, it's great. Well, okay, go back and review it and really look at the details of something and see how that kind of works out. So,
what are you human? Are you saying?
Oh
you're
my God, I
human?
am. I imagine that.
Yeah,
So.
but like, and again, this is kind of a bit of the respect I earned from Tom Brady watching this. Is there he owned a lot of mistakes throughout the series. Like I
Oh
screwed that
yeah.
up, right? Like I screwed that up. I shouldn't have said that. Like he owned like his humanity, right? Like we're going to make mistakes, man, and you gotta be willing to be the fool, as they say. So
Yeah, that leads us to episode 10. I thought it was obviously he makes the big move to Tampa, right? So he realizes that it's got to come to an end at the thing. I loved that he said, and it really got to this back to the end of 9, was it's nobody's business what goes on between what the relationship is and what was happening. I thought that was stoic. He's like, not everybody needs to know everything, and I get where he's coming from. But he also knows that he's on a stage, and a lot of his decisions are going to be, regardless, it's going to be questioned. It's going to be whatever. If you don't say stuff, it's going to happen anyways. But I think in this case, he said, look, it's time for me to go. And I've always looked at that as, look, go find a challenge, right? There's a history in the NFL of quarterbacks late in their careers leaving when they've been solid. And look, nobody's done it, right? Montana didn't do it. Favre didn't do it. The ones that were notable that moved on to different places weren't successful where they went. They were not to reaching to the top of the pinnacle again. And so his dad was in this one, and I thought it was really, first of all, and nod off to my boss, Tom was like, I wrote all the data points down of where the places were going to go, and whether it was weather, whether it was close to Jack, whether it was all this stuff, and that the highest score won is what ended up happening, right? The people that were there. I thought that was great. It was a data decision. I've done that once in my life before I went to SAR school. I was looking, Katie and I wrote them all down and wrote the things. Could we go back to Whitby? Yes, we could. All the stuff that we had done, and I've done that. Yeah. And sometimes it's that simple. I think your decisions can be really tough, but sometimes if you write them down and you see it, whether it's on a whiteboard or whatever your thing is, I thought that was great that he was like, where could I still be successful? Where could I implement some of the things that I'm good at? Where could I have a beautiful life? He thought about all those things. And I thought that was a really good point to all of this, of it all, of saying, okay, there are times when you laying it all out was really good to do. I thought that was pretty interesting.
And as a leader, right? Like, this is a great point of taking time and playing it out. Like I love, like I think I originally heard it from Michael Phelps. Talked about how he had won those races in his mind many times before he actually did. And from a leadership perspective, right? Like, just the opportunity is there to slow down, and ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and play out your options, right? Like, play them out. Sit down with the whiteboard. I do it with these what I call draft pads. I'll play it out. Like, if I do, like, start drawing decision trees. Like, if I decide to do this, another tool, part of my coaching is the action indicator assessment, where you're trying to decide if doing this is the right thing. And it's just an assessment to go, where do these compartments add up? If you made this decision, what does it look like? Is it aligned with your goals? Is it any intrinsic rewards, extrinsic rewards out? It lets you just kind of qualify a decision. And in addition to visualizing the decision, and that's what he did here. He said, if I went here, this would happen. If I went there, that would happen. And always too, like, what are you solving for? And he was kind of analyzing it that way too. Like, what good or bad was going to come. Like, from his holistic approach to life, not just football, right? Life.
Yeah, and I think from a business ownership and or a C-suite level, I think one of the things too is look, he's 40 years old. He's not going to make a decision irrationally
Mm,
just to say I'm going to go do something, right? You could kind of guess that would happen. That there would be a lot of factors involved, no matter what. That he said he wrote them all out, and the score came out too, right? I thought that was pretty interesting to it, but I also think that as an older person, and I'm 45, I think there's challenges, right? Like I want to be challenged again in the stuff that I do, in if it's bringing a new technology to fruition, if it's doing this and putting ourselves out there to do. I think everybody can look at it from a perspective of, especially in this world of change that we have, right? We didn't even talk about his COVID that they had to, when he did, well, actually, we did. This is part of it. He moves to Tampa, COVID happens. Now, all of a sudden, that's not planned on his thing to say the world's going to, right? It's a very different, and he's got to get over a lot of things.
yeah.
Again, looks back on his adversity to do stuff, right? His dad is in this one, actually. This is where his dad comes in and he starts talking about stuff. By the way, very emotional episode, the most emotional one. It hits him right in the face with his father, and I thought it was great just that this all kind of happened. Gronk is in this one too. Gronk's talking about he comes back with him because he's over a whatever. But his dad said something I thought that was good, and again, I don't know if it's his or not. He said, "Tough times don't last, tough people do," and I thought that was great. Of just being, look, you're it's going to hit, life's going to hit us all in the mouth, right? It's going to give us things that we have to figure it all out. I think it's a resiliency statement, obviously, for things. I think that's important, right? Because even if it's a tough time and that becomes the normalcy, which it did for COVID for all of us, who's going to be able to, if you're a business owner, could you pivot and could you change and could you last? If you
Yep.
were this, how could you do that, right? DoorDash and food, all that stuff. Oh, we get food to people now, right? You
Yep.
hear of all kinds of little businesses changing the way that they did stuff to be able to get back to their people and whatever. And not everybody did that, but I thought it was just a really interesting piece that was not factored into his decision at all,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? But he's down there now in Tampa and he's doing all this stuff with Alex. And he's like, man, look at where we are now. We're not in a broom closet someplace. We're in, 85 degrees. It's gorgeous out doing his stuff. So, but I thought it was, again, as an older guy, older person, regardless, I think, Laura and I had talked about challenges in generations. There's no way he was still high performance. He's still what he was. And to take it on as a challenge, that's scary. And it was also, but he was like, man, that's a great challenge. And I think there's a lot of people who take on new ventures when they get older. And it's like, now what? Let's go. Right. You said, if you're not growing, you're dead. I think that was a piece he didn't have. He was 20 years. He was at the same thing. He won, 6 Super Bowls already. Like, dude, let's go see if I could do it. Right. Nobody'd ever done that in the NFL before. There was a history of people not. I thought it was a great kind of piece for it, about it, and what his dad kind of added to it.
Man, I don't know, man. As far as I don't know, as far as physically performance and all that stuff, age is one of those low hanging fruit excuses that you can just grab when it's convenient for you.
Sure.
Right. I mean, I'm just reading the other day about a 70-year-old and finishing his 100-miler. Right. It's like, come on, man.
Crush it.
You know what I mean? Like, come on. I remember, dude, running my first marathon. I remember looking up and I was struggling, and I look up, I'm at I ran the Marine Corps Marathon, was my first one. And at the end, classic Marine style, you got to run up this hill to the Iwo Jima Memorial, but you just ran 26 miles, and the last 500 feet, you got to freaking run up a steep incline to the finish line. And I remember getting to that before we turned on it. And I look up and there's a, elderly lady. I'm dying. I'm like, and I look up and there's this elderly lady, and I'm every bit of 65 plus. She's ahead of me. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? What are you whining about? Get up that freaking hill. You know what I mean? And so I just want to remind people like age and kids and all these things that are life can be these low-hanging fruit excuses to not do something or not do the right thing or whatever. And they're just lies that you're conveniently able to tell yourself to get you out of discomfortable things, man.
Right.
Like
So hold on, you told your story. I had almost the same thing, right? Where it was my first half Ironman in St. Croix, and they have this thing called the Beast, and it's like a 600-yard incline that you have to do on the bike. It's like 30 degrees. It's insane. Like it even says that they keep it all there. They repaint it every year that says the Beast. I walked up the first one, no doubt, and you don't get any relief because you're in cycling shoes, so you're still walking on. Like you're walking with calves, right?
Yeah,
so it's not a relief that you get to walk up at all.
Sure,
it's actually right. Second year, I only did it twice, but second year I made it further than what I did, which was great. But the first year, I get to the run. It was the worst part of my whole thing, which is fine. And I get to about 5 miles left, and a nice older woman. At the time I was young, I was probably 25, 26. A nice older woman. She's probably in her 40s at the time. To me, that was old, right, for that time. But she comes up next to me. She's like, "Hey, how you doing?" And I'm like, "Hey." And she's like, "Let's just do this together." And I'm like, "Okay." And she brought me through literally until probably 2,000 yards left. And then I'm like, "Okay, I got to kick this. This is where she's like, "No worries. I'll see you at the end." And it was just, she kept her pace. She knew where she was in life. But like, I wouldn't have got through, honestly, I wouldn't have got through those miles. She said, we'll just take it mile by mile. And we had, it was 13 miles, so it was whatever left to do. But same thing, like just crushing it. And you're just like, and mentally way more stronger than I was mentally about it all. And it was a great little lesson for it.
And I before we wrap up, I want to say, right, like, so we're using age as the example as a low-hanging fruit, but don't be caught in the trap of like COVID, the markets, and whatever are your low-hanging fruit excuses for your lack of action, lack of results from a leadership perspective, right? Like, yeah, those things are there and they're on the shelf, and you're welcome to grab them and say, "It's not me, nothing I could do. It's COVID," right? Daggone markets down, supply chain. Hey, man, lead your way through it. There is a way. I mean, stop. Those are just you challenge yourself. I'm not going to blanket statement it, but challenge yourself. Is that the truth or just what you're telling yourself to not have to deal with the difficult situation you're in?
Yeah, because some of it's real. Like, let's be real. Like there definitely are things that are going to set you back.
They're challenges.
Challenges. Fine. No big deal. Like, and not everybody's going to find, they're in the different niches that were happening. Not everybody's going to find something that the answer is there right away. So I don't want to give our viewers, and and I know this too, it's not all sunshine and daisies, and just because you get a challenge doesn't mean it's not going to still suck. Like, there are absolute reasons that things are going to take those turns. And I just, again, go to Giselle, 2 and 4.
Yeah.
Why is this happening to me versus why is this happening for me, and what can I do? And that is honestly, I just look at this entire thing and wrapping this all up. I mean, it was a great series. It was a great time picking out the leadership lessons within it. I have a very different perspective of someone who beat our ass for 20 years from what he was doing. But at the same time, like, I just, he earned every bit of what they were doing. There was nothing given. And whatever you believe in the NFL and all the crap that's happening to it, like, it is a grind, and to win, you have to, that's not easy to do, to those types of things. There's a lot of work in it. And it's no different than the small business owner who's trying to grind and sell his pizzas or do his HVAC or run a tattoo shop, whatever those are going to be for them. So I just, again, great, great man in the arena is a perfect metaphor for what he talked about, and the leadership lessons we learned from it. Again, I pulled a lot from this that I thought was really good. So this was fun. It was a good little offshoot from what we were doing before.
Yeah, man. Now we're gonna do more of this because I like say, leadership's the force, man. It's everywhere.
Yeah, there's The Last Dance. The Last Dance is out there. I
Yeah,
thought that
Last
was
Dance
good.
is something too.
Yep. We could do so. Listen, I thought about it too. We won't do this now. We're gonna probably hit a book next time. Actually, we are hitting a book next time. So next month is Laura Colbert, one of our contributors here on Lions Guide, wrote her own book called Sirens: Learning to Peace Standing Up. And that will be our book next month. Laura also obviously sits with me every Monday, the first Thursday every month. So we'll see her next week for our own little rant with me and her going off on stuff. We're going to talk about change, change management, and change fatigue, and the things that are kind of happening and are real as well. We got a good lineup next month. Actually, that's not next week. Next week is James Tyler's coming on board, which is great. Following week, which is the July. Sorry about that. So anyways, but good. And we can do, listen, another one we can do, which I think is really good in a very opposite way of this, is The Four Falls of Buffalo. So it's a one-part documentary series, but it talks about the 4 Super Bowls that Buffalo lost. Because I think you'll see, I think we're going to see a lot, and I've obviously watched it. There's a lot of the same lessons that they learned in losing and versus Tom Brady did in winning, right? Yeah. So I think we're able to see a very stark comparison. So we'll look at that maybe towards the first part of the new year in September timeframe. But yeah, so good. What do you got going on? Give me one last shout out.
Well, we're heads down on some coursework, so look for around September timeframe. We've got some new courses coming out for leadership and performance and so on. So I'm excited about that. So we got a lot coming. We're on a summer. We're kind of letting everyone do their summer thing. So not a lot of pressure on, workshops and my groups and the things that we're doing. But we're heads down working on a lot of good stuff to wrap the year up, get everyone, really humming, ready for the next year and get out there and get it, man. So I'm on a high, bro. Like I was texting you this morning, like, man, the stuff that we're doing and the impact and just, I'm pumped.
Yeah. And we are doing that for the high performance and for the
running 100 miler in December.
You are. So I thought about this. I was like, you have this challenge this month. I was like, I think I could pump out 300 miles on the bike before the end of the month. I was like, maybe I'll start. I know. I was thinking about it. My days are going down, so I'm going to whittle it down to the last 3 days and just do 100 miles every day. And I'm like, that's probably not going to
That's cooking, dude.
I know it's cooking.
but look, man, success has to start somewheres, right? Because I've been saying that throughout the month. Like, just prorate it. If fine, it's at last week of the month. You didn't start at the beginning month, whatever. If you had, how many miles would you be doing? Just do that.
So 30 days, 300 miles. Like, if you can knock out those in the last, whatever it's going to be. And that's for anybody. That's just not for me.
Right. Yeah.
Well, listen, good as always, my friend.
Love it.
Having a good week. And listen, thanks for everybody for stopping by. We appreciate it for listening to us. We had a great one this time. It was a great one every time. Last but not least, as always, flip out. You guys have a great week.
Take care. Be good.